Hello, test. Good afternoon. Hope everyone had a good lunch. My name is Nick Johnson. I'm a developer for the Ethereum Foundation on the Go Ethereum team, but primarily I spend most of my time lately on ENS, the Ethereum name service, for which I'm the team lead. I'm here today to give you a quick update on ENS progress since last I spoke at DevCon 3 and announce a few new things with how we're getting on. So, this is not working. Right. So client adoption of ENS continues to grow in leaps and bounds. We're continually having to shrink the size of the icons to fit more in, which is always a good sign. We've now got adoption across a wide variety of wallets, both mobile and desktop, as well as an increasing number of apps such as Swarm and NameBazaar that are using it. We're working with others who are yet to launch and optimistic that we'll be able to grow this list a lot in future. Our goal as the ENS team is to make ENS so ubiquitous that nobody needs to manually type in an address unless they're a developer. Just like nobody types in an IP address unless they're a developer into their web browser, nobody should have to deal with blockchain addresses day to day. And so pretty much everything we're doing here has the goal of making that easier and more straightforward. So what's new with ENS? Three main things today. ENS Limited, ENS Working Groups, and instant registration of subdomains. And I'm going to go into each of those in a lot more detail. So first of all, I announced at DevCon 3 that we would be forming a separate organisation for ENS to help forward ENS's goals, to pay for development, and to run a sort of a standards organisation to standardise ENS and protocols based on it and ensure wide adoption. So after much delay, we're pleased to announce that we're finally actually forming the ENS organisation. It will be a not-for-profit headquartered in Singapore. It will direct and fund research and development as a non-profit entity, and it's separate and distinct from the Ethereum Foundation. They have generously agreed to fund us for at least our first year, which will allow us to hire a couple extra developers and other experts and get things really moving, but we will be a separate and independent organisation. Next, the other main thing we've been working on in the meantime is launching working groups for ENS. The goal here is to make it easy for everyone, yourselves included, to participate in the standardization process to improve ENS, to build new protocols on top of it, and to make it more usable for people. So we have just launched the ENS working groups. You can access them now at discuss.ens.domains. We have working groups and discussion groups on building the permanent registrar, which is our #1 priority, building the replacement for the current interim registrar, which we hope to have ready approximately a year from now. DNS integration, so making it easier for you to register ENS names that match up to a DNS name you hold, or hosting your DNS name based off ENS, both of which are underway as separate efforts. Dispute resolution, which I'll go into more detail in a minute, about ways to resolve issues where one person registers a name and somebody else believes they have a claim on it, or situations where a name is registered but is used by spammers or phishers or used for other forms of attack. Usability, the #1 thing that's going to improve adoption of ENS in this space is making it easily usable and transparent to users. Ecosystem and adoption, so building out more clients, more dApps, support everywhere. And finally, dApps directly related to ENS, such as the registration app, the manager app, and so on and so forth. So if you have any interest in this at all, particularly any interest in the working groups where we can standardize things and help build them out, I'd strongly encourage you to go along, sign up there, pitch in. It's a bit bare bones at the moment because we've just launched it, but expect a lot of activity over the coming days and weeks. So to go over briefly a few of the challenges we have, first up, dispute resolution. The idea is that the base ENS system and the .eth registrar does not have a built-in dispute resolution system. Once you've registered a name, it's yours as long as you follow the rules, and those rules don't include a system for arbitration or for removing your name from you. And the outcome of the first ENS workshop last August in London was that we should initially start working on this issue as a second layer problem. So we don't want to modify the base ENS system. Instead, we want to provide a way for people to build their own dispute systems on top of it, much like the way spam lists work with email. The goal here is that I seem to have lost some labels, or at least they're very hard to see. The leftmost box is the user, the middle box is the dispute resolution, the blacklist, and the rightmost box is ENS itself. So in this example, we want to resolve foo.xyz. The user sends a query to the blacklist and says, give me foo.xyz. The blacklist says, I don't have that in my blacklist. I'll forward the request onto the regular ENS registrar and return with the result. In the case where you try and resolve something that is on the blacklist, say bad.xyz, again you send it to the blacklist, but this time the blacklist finds it in its lookup table, says that no, that's a phishing domain, we don't want you going there, and returns an empty address instead, which the client can then interpret as being blacklisted or non-existent. So the idea here is that everyone can establish their own dispute resolution system if they wish. They can set their own rules for inclusion, and everyone who wants to use ENS can choose whether or not to opt into this or any other blacklisting system. We already have some work underway on this on the ENS domains GitHub project, and we're hoping to really sort of start to standardize this with the working group. Next up, the design of the permanent registrar. We launched the original interim registrar using a deposit and auction scheme. The idea there is that you bid on the name you want. The person who bids the most gets the name. They pay the amount of the second highest bidder, so a vicary auction. And then the money they paid, rather than being spent or burned, is deposited into a contract for sort of safekeeping. And it stays there for as long as they retain the domain. If they decide they don't want the domain anymore, they can give it up and they can recover their deposit. This works reasonably well as a way of applying an economic cost, but one thing that we underappreciated at the time is that the cost of capital for someone varies depending on who they are. If we look at these three different classes of user here, we have the regular user who wants to buy an ENS domain and use it more or less forever. They win the auction for, say, 1 Ether. That means they pay 1 Ether, and that Ether is going to be locked up in the deposit forever because they want to keep the domain forever. On the other hand, we have an investor. They're buying a bunch of domains with the intention of selling them on to people later. And in that case, they really only have the cost of what else they could have done with their money. You know, they could have invested it in the stock market or a savings account or any number of other things. So the cost to them is a yearly cost, and it takes a long time for them to basically call it a loss and write it off. And then on the third class of user, you have a speculator who has Ether already. All their Ether would have been doing was sitting in an account. They go, well, why not? I may as well throw some of it at some ENS domains. And the cost to them for holding on to it is effectively zero. They're not losing anything by doing so. And this asymmetry makes it easier than it should have been to sort of pollute the namespace by buying up speculatively a lot of domains to resell them, and proportionally more expensive for legitimate users. So the solution we have is to switch to a rent model. Auctions are still likely to be used for initial allocation of names, but in order to retain a name, you will have to pay to the system some fixed rent. It will be the same regardless of whether your name is obscure.eth or, you know, top.ensdomain.eth, but it will be a fixed fee that ensures that some small cost is applied, which discourages people from buying and squatting on a vast number of names they're never going to use. So one of the main questions is, how do you set this rent? Because Ether price, as you all know, fluctuates wildly with external constraints. We can't simply set the price of a domain as, say, 0.1 Ether a year because, you know, give it a little while and that'll be either a vast amount of money or not much at all. So what we're proposing, and it, as a work in progress, but the initial proposal is a feedback system. And the way this works is the system itself measures how many domains are being deregistered. And the intuition here is that the goal of the system, this rent system, is to encourage the deregistration of domains that aren't being used so that they return to the system. So we measure the deregistration rate, which is the blue here. We're targeting 2% a year. And the feedback system is built that anytime the deregistration rate increases, it decreases the cost of registration, and vice versa. Anytime it decreases, it increases the cost. And this forms a feedback loop that encourages a reasonable level of cost, in that if it was too high, fewer people would register names, and if it was too low, more people would be inclined to. As I say, this is a work in progress. There are some interesting issues with gameability of the system. And again, this is another excellent reason. If you have better ideas on how to build an economically stable system around this, then we would welcome your input. The other main improvement we're anticipating is for the permanent registrar design, and that is rolling auctions. Presently, in order to buy a domain, you first have to start an auction and then bid on an auction, and then in the reveal period, reveal your bid. So that's 3 separate actions, and then a finalise at the end to actually take control of your name. One of the weaknesses of this is that you have to reveal the hash of your name in order to start the auction. And although it's hashed, in many cases the names are fairly predictable, and also there are people out there who will speculatively bid against you just in case, you know, they think that they can make some profit off it. Instead, we're proposing to move to a system called rolling auctions. And the idea here is that every 2 days a new auction window starts. And, oh dear, something's gone horribly wrong with these slides in Safari. So at the beginning of the period, we open an auction that lasts, say, 2 days. And in that period, anyone can bid on any name whatsoever. They don't have to open the auction first. After the 2 days are over, anyone who bid in the previous 2 days can now reveal in the following 2 days. And then at the end of that period, if any bids were revealed for a name, then the auction is settled between those bids, and whoever bid wins. If somebody started bidding in the second period and there were also bids in the first period, then they would simply get their funds refunded. So the way this works is effectively you can start an auction on a name anytime you want without having to announce what you're bidding on, which makes it almost impossible for anyone to determine what auctions are going on at the time and snipe it. And the final thing that I want to go over is DNS integration. So I mentioned previously that one of the working groups will focus on integration with DNS. There's sort of 2 directions this can go in. One is hosting DNS domains on ENS, and we're speaking to internet registrars and others who are interested in doing this. But the one that is more core to ENS is the idea of being able to take ownership of your DNS name inside ENS, meaning that you can have myname.com as a valid ENS address that resolves to an Ethereum account address or a contract, just like any other. And the way we're doing this is with DNSSEC, which is the secure layer on top of DNS. First of all, the way DNSSEC works is every record set can be signed by a key, and those keys are attested to by the parent domain. So in this case, we have the root domain, and all we know to start is what the hash of the keys for the root domain is. And then from that, we can fetch the keys for the root domain. And then from that, we can ask it what is the hash of the keys for XYZ. And then from that, we can fetch and verify the keys for XYZ, and the process repeats on down. So we fetch ethlab.xyz, we know its hash, then we know the key. Then finally, we can fetch a DNS record and verify that that record is correct. And all of this can be done on-chain from inside a smart contract. It's already deployed on Ropsten. You can test it out now. So any DNSSEC-enabled domain, you can prove the existence of any DNS record and its complete contents. So using this system, it makes it possible for us to prove the ownership of a DNS domain and therefore claim it inside ENS. So again, we've lost some labels. On the left here is the user, and the second box is the oracle. First of all, the user submits a proof to the oracle, proving that particular DNSSEC records have a particular value. The oracle verifies the signatures and accepts them. Secondly, the user submits a claim to the registrar that is in charge of dealing with DNS domains, and it says, I own this domain.xyz, say ethlab.xyz. That registrar then queries the oracle and says, please give me the text record for ethlab.xyz, which returns it, and it verifies that the address that's embedded in that record matches the address that you actually submitted this query with. And finally, if it's correct, it goes off and it tells the ENS registry, yes, this person should own this domain, transfer ownership of it to the original user account. So with this, any domain that supports DNSSEC and the algorithms we support can be used on Ethereum in ENS. Presently on Ropsten, we've rolled out support for it with .xyz. And at present, approximately 2/3 to 3/4 of all DNS top-level domains support the combination of algorithms we need in order to do this. So shortly after we deploy this on mainnet, we anticipate rolling this out to a vast number of domains, and most DNS domains, including all the popular ones like .com, .net, etc., will be usable inside ENS. And this is awkward. Sorry, I've never tried these slides in Safari before, so you'll have to bear with me for just a second. Yep, it doesn't help that it's a French keyboard either. And it also doesn't help that I can't even see the address bar from the screen I'm looking at. And nor can I, there we go. Right. So this was announced at DevCon 3, but I'm pleased to say that it's now finally available and fully functional on mainnet. This is called ENS Now. The goal here is to make it easier for anyone who wants to name their wallet to get an ENS name instantly without going through a lengthy option process, without having to know really anything about the system at all. So the user interface is about as simple as it gets. We enter a name in here. We'll say ETHCC. We'll give it a second, and it looks up all of the available second-level domains that are in the system. Currently, that's gimmeth.eth and wantsome.eth. You pick the one you prefer. I'm going to say I prefer ethcc.wantsome.eth. We can see that the owner of wantsome.eth wants to charge 0.005 ether. That's about $4 at the moment. I'm happy with that. I click, oh blast, and again, I'm hit by the fact that I'm using not my own browser. In any case, if this was working because you had MetaMask installed, you would click there, it would pop up a MetaMask transaction window. You don't need to enter any manual data or anything. You just click approve to sign, pops up a dialog. As soon as the transaction's mined, you now own ethcc.wantsome.eth, and what's more, that address has automatically been pointed at your wallet, the one that sent the transaction. So now you can already go to other people and tell them that that's your wallet address with just a single interaction with the chain. I'd encourage you to try it out now. If you have some interesting second-level domains that you think people might want subdomains of, please come see me after and we'll arrange to add them. But other than that, that's all I have for you today, so thank you very much. I think I have about 2 minutes for questions, if anyone has any. Yes. 1 second.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, with the mainnet integration of DNS names, are you afraid of any forms of attacks or anything like that?
So I guess it depends on the attack you're thinking of. I'm confident in the security of the ENS system to it because of its hierarchical nature. The worst that can happen is signatures under the given domain they can't break out of their sort of sandbox. There are, of course, a number of possible attacks, such as somebody obtains the private key for .xyz and then signs a whole lot of invalid records. Those same attacks already exist with DNS, so effectively the security of a DNS imported name is no higher than the security of that name itself. And that's one reason that people may want to continue using .eth, despite having a profusion of other names available, is that it has a different trust model, and it relies on different sort of antecedents. Another potential attack model, of course, is the censorship attack, where some organisation with sufficient power orders your domain offline, and the registrar on the internet follows, and then somebody can then prove that your domain no longer exists, which means it gets deleted from ENS. So another reason to use .eth if you believe you might be subject to that. In terms of the security of the actual on-chain components, one of the reasons we haven't launched it on mainnet yet is because we want to get really thorough security audits before we go live on mainnet. So, cool. Time for one other question. Maybe we don't have any.
We got one up top here.
Thank you. So I have some questions about the auction process for buying name services. So I am a bit confused about the bidding process. So when you bid on a domain name, what is hidden at that point? Is it the name that you bid on, or the amount of ether that you want to bid with on that name service? And also for the reveal, I wanted to know, like, why, if you forget to reveal, you lose the bid. Do you lose your ether, or you only use the bid that you don't have the name of anymore? And what I wanted to say also, and why do you pay the second highest bid, not the highest bid?
Yep.
Thank you.
So when you place a bid, the only information that's available to somebody outside is that you placed a bid and the amount of ether you sent in the transaction. And the way it's constructed, you can send along more ether than you actually bid just to disguise the true amount, which means you could bid 0.1 but send along 10 ether and thus fairly effectively disguise the true size of your bid. Obviously that's not perfect protection, but it's the best we can get short of ZK snarks. Unfortunately, with the current auction system, before you can bid, you have to open an auction, and that provides a window where people can associate the open transaction with the bid transaction and decide that's probably what you're bidding on. And knowing what you're bidding on and what the most your bid could be gives them quite a lot of information. As to your, I'm going to go for your third question first. Why you lose your bid if you don't reveal? Maybe that was your second question. The reason for this is that if you don't, there is an extortion attack possible. Suppose I want to be particularly nasty to you. I know you're going to be buying some great name.eth, and I know you're prepared to pay quite a lot of money, but there's maybe not much competition for it. What I can do is I can place bids at 10 ether, 20 ether, 30 ether, 40 ether, 50 ether, and then once you've revealed your bid, I can go to, maybe your bid is 45. I can go to you and say, you know, it'd be really bad if somebody revealed a bid for 40 ether. Wouldn't that be terrible? You'd like have to lock up all this money. If you give me 5 ether, I won't reveal my bid. And so by disqualifying and effectively deleting bids that weren't revealed, we prevent that attack because you would be guaranteed to lose every bid you didn't reveal. And your other question was, why do you only pay the second most? The best summary of that is that this is a Vickery auction, and if you look it up on Wikipedia, there's a good description of the game theoretical mechanics. But the short version is that by only bidding the amount, by only paying the second highest bid, the rational way to bid is to bid the maximum it's possibly worth to you, because you do so knowing that you'll only have to pay as much as the most it's worth to someone else. Whereas if you paid the amount of your bid, you would instead be in a guessing game where you're trying to bid just a smidgen above the next highest bidder, which makes for a much less efficient system. And that's all we have time for, so thank you very much.